Hello and welcome to the Of Interest podcast. I'm Alice Summers from interest.co.nz. I'm joined today by Tim Grafton, who's been the Chief Executive of the Insurance Council of New Zealand since November 2012 and is finishing up in the role this month. Throughout his almost 12 years as the Chief Executive of the Insurance Council, Tim has had a front row seat to some of the natural disasters, regulatory reforms and technological disruptions that have impacted and shaped New Zealand's insurance landscape in recent years. Well, hi Tim, welcome to the Of Interest podcast. It's great to have you with us. How are you today?
Very well, and thanks very much for inviting me on. Don't usually get invited to these sorts of things, so very happy to be part of your podcast.
Great. Well, I'd love to start off with, you've obviously been the CEO of Insurance Council for coming up 12 years, which is a really long time. You've obviously seen a lot of things and changes during that period, but what I'd love to kind of ask before we talk about that is, what were you doing before taking on the Insurance Council Chief Executive role, and what inspired this jump into the insurance sector?
Oh, well, immediately prior, I was an executive director and shareholder of a market research company that was providing strategic advice and direction to corporates. And I'd been doing the job for about a decade and needed a change. So I also wanted a challenge, and I guess I also wanted an opportunity to take on a leadership role. So I think when the role at ICNZ came up, I was one of about 87 applicants. And thinking back, I think I probably got the role due to a combination of things. I was able to bring an outsider's view to the Canterbury Earthquakes, which was consuming everybody's time in the insurance sector then. I had a good understanding of the machinery of government, and from an earlier career in journalism, the ability to grasp, I think, complex issues and distill them and explain them simply.
Oh, that's great. Obviously, when you started as Insurance Council's Chief Executive in November 2012, it wasn't long after the two major Canterbury earthquakes, and then I think Auckland had that tornado in December 2012 as well. So what shape was the New Zealand insurance industry in when you became CEO, and did anything surprise you?
Well, the insurance industry was stretched to the max by the catastrophe of the Canterbury earthquakes. There was, the earthquakes created a lot of chaos and tension in the community, and almost 100% of our resources, ICNZ, and a very significant proportion of the resources of our members were devoted to the recovery in Canterbury. It was a hugely complex event. We had multiple earthquakes, an antiquated lodgement and settlement process. We had to figure out how to apportion costs between each earthquake. There was land assessment that needed to be done, and land remediation challenges, land reclassification. There were novel legal challenges, lots of legal cases before the courts. New compensation arrangements for land vulnerable to flood and liquefaction had to be worked out. We had houses that we couldn't repair because it was dependent on other repairs being done to infrastructure, typically on hillsides, or where drainage systems were affected by the earthquakes. Usually it's a gravity-fed system underneath the ground, and if the ground's moved up, you've got a problem. It was a complete breakdown of the Christchurch City Council consenting system for progressing builds. And then we had complexities around multi-unit buildings, cross-leased properties, and of course we had a lot of vulnerable and distressed people, and the list could go on. So it was a pretty major catastrophe, and working through that was a pretty significant challenge.
How long did that did the length of the recovery from that take longer than you expected?
Yes, it did. I think it took much longer than anybody expected. And in fact, even today, there are claims that remain unsettled So it's been a hugely long process because the first earthquake was in September 2010. We had I think a system that was in bad need of an overhaul, and that has since happened. But going into a catastrophe of that size with an inadequate system for dealing with claims was just made life very, very difficult indeed.
Obviously, earthquakes and flooding and cyclones are completely different things, but did the Canterbury earthquakes prepare the insurance industry somewhat when it comes to huge, massive disasters when the Auckland floods and Cyclone Gabrielle happened last year?
Yeah, very much so. And probably there was an intermediary step, which was the Kaikoura earthquake in November 2016. So when that earthquake struck, which was just a little bit after midnight, I think on the 14th of November, a lot of people were thrown out of bed almost by the earthquake in Wellington. And after the shaking stopped, I rang my counterpart at EQC, Ian Simpson, who was at CE there at the time, said, we've got to do better than Canterbury, and can we meet in a few hours and work out where we go from here? So within 4 weeks, we had the foundations of an agreement which enabled insurers to manage and settle claims on behalf of EQC. And that meant that for the customer, there was one point of accountability and responsibility for their claims, their insurer. And so it didn't matter whether it was an EQC claim or an insurer claim, they didn't get bounced around between the two. So from that, we then developed a more formal and longer-lasting agreement with EQC to be their agents. And I think also the experience of those events from Canterbury through to Kaikoura meant that when the Auckland anniversary floods and Cyclone Gabrielle came along, we were well seasoned in dealing with these kind of situations. And I think the proof of that is the rate of settlement. So I mentioned before that there are still unsettled claims from the Canterbury earthquakes. The claims from Kaikoura, we had most of those settled within 12 months. But with Auckland anniversary and Cyclone Gabrielle, which was the two combined was more than twice the size of the claims from Kaikoura. We settled 87% of them within 9 months. And so, just a huge change in the rate of response to settling claims for customers.
Yeah, that's huge. Obviously, like with Canterbury, it's still ongoing in some ways, many years on. How long do you think it will be in the future until the devastation of the Auckland floods and Cyclone Gabrielle is behind us?
I think, we're over 90% through today. Well, that was about a month or two ago. The outstanding claims now are largely ones where land is damaged the property or is threatening to damage the property and from landslips and the like, and also for customers not sure how to proceed because they still don't know whether they're in a Category 3, that is a voluntary buyout situation, or Category 2, where some work needs to be done to reduce the risk that they face. So that's being worked through by Auckland Council, and the sooner that that's completed, the better for the customers, because they're in that limbo land of not being able to make the decision that they want to make. Do they repair their property or are they going to sell out?
Makes sense. We've seen the increase of severe weather events and natural disasters, and then, you've seen a fair few in your time as CEO of the council. How has the discussion around climate change and its impacts on the insurance industry in New Zealand changed in that time as well?
Well, I think there's been a huge change. About 10 years ago, we produced a booklet about reducing risk to New Zealand, and it provided a framework for that. We're highlighting climate change. I remember doing an interview with Radio New Zealand at the time, and the challenge was put to me, well, how on earth are you going to get that conversation going? So today, I think climate impact's very much on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. A lot of people have been affected by the big events, especially of last year. And also councils are changing their attitudes too. So, the regional councils have gone to the new government and are trying to get some assistance for floodplain protection from the government. We've got, a consultation on a national policy statement on natural hazard decision making, which hopefully will progress, which requires councils to do a risk assessment around new development. So, there's a palpable change in attitudes towards climate risks and how we manage them going forward. I think we've still got a long way to go because climate change brings lots of wicked problems, and wicked problems require systemic solutions. So, and by that I mean we have to have the right, oversight and framework that, central government provides through legislation or providing policy statements. We have to have the right attitude around, will the finance sector fund people to develop in dumb places? That shouldn't be happening. So we need to have finance system looking at, whether it will support that. We need a science system that's making information readily available to people to help them make the right decisions, whether that's councils or individuals choosing where they might live. We need a emergency management system that is also focused on prevention much more strongly. So, we start looking at the top of the cliff rather than responding at the bottom of the cliff. I think the insurance sector too can provide more information to help make decisions, and also to provide greater advice to customers about the risks that they face from natural hazards.
Have insurers and councils, in your experience, been receptive to these conversations around climate change? Like, do they all want to make changes?
Yeah, definitely, increasingly so. We've had conversations with the regional councils about their floodplain protection proposals called Deluge 2.0. And we've had a lot of interaction, obviously, with the councils that were affected by Cyclone Gabrielle and the Auckland anniversary floods. So there's definitely a big change in attitude, but you've also got to have the right legislative regulatory framework in place too, because we still have decisions made that you've got to question. So, for instance, after the floods in Auckland last year, about 1,100 properties were consented in flood-prone areas. So, what is it about the system that enables that to happen? Because, I'm pretty sure that those consents won't be anticipating what climate will be like in 30, 40, 50 years' time, which will be the lifespan of those new developments. And so, we've got to put a stop to making things worse and then think about how we fix up existing property which is at risk.
What have been the biggest regulatory or legislative challenges you've encountered in your time as the Insurance Council's CEO? and how have you navigated them? And is there anything you look back on and wish you'd done differently or it had happened differently?
Right. Well, I've got to say that we have been, over this time, experienced definitely the most significant regulatory and legislative change for the insurance sector that we've ever had in New Zealand's history. So we had the what's called the Insurance Prudential Supervision Act, which is basically the legislation that enables the Reserve Bank to regulate insurers to ensure that essentially they're going to be there for the policyholder and not going to be financially unviable to meet their commitments to policyholders after a major event. So that is now being reviewed. So that came in 2012, and now for the last 3 or 4 years it's been under review. So that process is going on. That has been a huge piece of work. Conduct of financial institutions legislation that is in place, but the new government has indicated it does wish to make some changes to that. And all these pieces of legislation bring with them regulations as well that we have to deal with. Then there's the climate-related disclosures. So the XRB, the standard setter in New Zealand, sets standards for disclosure of climate change exposure, and that was a major piece of work. It was a major piece of work for us at ICNZ as we worked with our members to ensure that we could provide what was a world first in terms of the insurance sector producing climate scenarios over the short, medium and long term, and looking at the impact of those changes with respect to all parts of the value chain. So a really big piece of work there. Obviously, the work related around the EQC, what will be the Natural Hazard Insurance Act coming into effect on 1 July, and all the background work that goes with that as well, and changes to our arrangements with EQC because of the changes made to the Act. And then one of the most frustrating pieces of work that I'm sad to say we have not had success on has been trying to remove the levy from insurance that funds fire and emergency in New Zealand. Currently, that's costing well over $700 million a year. It will soon be hitting $1 billion a year. And it's quite unfair because only people who insure themselves fund the fire and emergency in New Zealand. And it's way out of date and out of whack with any other jurisdiction in the world. And the deadweight cost of collection of that levy is very significant. So really frustrated that we haven't been able to do anything about that.
That's quite a few things that you've seen in your...
It's just a few, because actually insurance crops up everywhere, you know. So if you're looking at, people want to talk to us when you're looking at, having fast track consenting and looking to see how insurance could contribute to managing those risks, or if there's a change to motor vehicle legislation, or if you're going to change the level of threshold for intoxication for driving, the insurance sector has a view on that, or just about anything. There's insurance leaking in the background.
How do you keep up with kind of having to keep up with knowing everything and knowing all the changes kind of across all these aspects related to insurance? Do you get much sleep?
I think in part it's having a great team, and also reaching out to members for their support and tapping into their expertise as well. So, but it's certainly a very busy job with a lot happening. And when you get catastrophe as well, that kind of you have to sort of bail out of the BAU and give your all to manage to responding and to the recovery. So it's all down to working collectively, not only at ICNZ but with our members as well. And I think out of the experiences of Canterbury Kaikoura and last year, you do create sort of bonds and commitment across the membership in ways that are really quite special, so that where there are common issues that obviously don't cut across competition issues, but enable the sector to work together. We are very good at that now.
We kind of touched on some of the challenges you've come across in your time as CEO of Insurance Council. What are some of the initiatives or achievements that you're most proud of in that time as well? When you look back on almost 12 years, what stands out to you?
I think, one would be ensuring that New Zealand, cliche here, punches above its weight internationally. So we're a member of the Global Federation of Insurance Associations, which represents insurers and reinsurers who cover about 87% of the world's insurance, almost $10 trillion of gross premium. And I'm on its executive, I'm its vice president. And the work that we've done there, providing an international report on global protection gaps, that is the gap between what people are insured for and what they're not insured for, right across from, general insurance and natural catastrophes, cyber insurance, health insurance and pensions, and putting affordability and availability on the strategic agenda for that organisation. And also just forging great relationships where we can call on help and we can give our own experiences. And that happened last year with the Turkish Association after, the catastrophic earthquake they experienced in February last year. So a lot of learnings that we gained from our seismic experiences we could pass on there. I think the agreement with EQC that insurers act as their agents, I think that is a very significant change for New Zealand in terms of responding to the natural hazards. We are the second most risky country around, so it's really important that we have a good, efficient insurance recovery system. And I'm also pleased to see sort of greater diversity and ICNZ hopefully better reflecting the society it serves. So we changed our brand, we changed our name, we have certainly strived to support and worked with our members on lots of things to improve diversity across the spectrum of insurance. And so, we are changing. It's always a long way to go on these things, but I'm really proud to see that because insurance is everywhere. If people don't realise it, then we've got to look and act and responsively to the wide cross-section of society that we serve. So that's absolutely fundamental to what we do.
Does the future, going back to your point about how New Zealand is such a risky country on the global stage, does the future of insurance in New Zealand worry you, let's say, in the next decade? And are you expecting that risk, I guess, to increase?
Yeah, so I think the answer to the risks to increase, yeah, definitely. So the globally and locally, climate change and cyber risks are probably the biggest threats that lie out there Climate, we know is just going to get worse in terms of more extreme and severe climate events. And cyber, just simply because of the pace of technological change, as we've seen, generative artificial intelligence coming into all facets of life, and that is just going to continue over the years to come, which is going to create new risks and cyber vulnerability in New Zealand is there. We don't do cyber risks amongst small businesses, and even at the household level, we don't do that well at all. Because of the interconnected nature of the world we live in, it only takes something to happen somewhere for that to feed through multiple supply chains and affect us badly. So there's big stuff there, and of course what we do have most knowledge of and still learning is the earthquake risk. And so another major earthquake hitting the capital, Wellington, or elsewhere, but a major city like Wellington, causing the damage of Canterbury. If that were to happen in the next short few years, that could be a game changer as well. So there are some big risks out there that we've just got to manage better.
If Wellington was hit by an earthquake, do you think, in your opinion, that would cause reinsurers to pull out of the New Zealand insurance market?
I don't know the answer to that. I think reinsurers would still be there, but the ability to purchase reinsurance at a good rate and the degree of capacity that would be available, particularly for property in Wellington, could be really challenging. I'm thinking of a earthquake the size of Canterbury. So if we had, say a $30-40 billion hit on Wellington, that would be, and coming, not long after, in relatively to the Canterbury earthquakes, where the public and private insurance sectors met $35 billion worth of claims. It would raise some questions, definitely, I think. And so, ensuring how we're managing that risk is really critical, because we're very dependent on offshore capital and reinsurance to help support our insurance programs in New Zealand.
Going back to, you mentioned the risks around cyber before and artificial intelligence. What conversations have you had with insurers around AI? Are they looking to harness it? Are they concerned about its rapid growth? How are insurers eyeing up AI?
Well, as you'd expect, we're talking about generative AI with machine learning here, so going a step beyond more simple forms of robotics. I've seen demonstration of generative AI creating a bespoke insurance policy, and I've seen a demonstration of the management and settlement of a claim done from motor vehicle accident within seconds. So it certainly has huge capacity to transform the sector. So those demonstrations I experienced when I was in Europe attending a conference last June. And here in New Zealand, the use of AI is certainly being supervised by human intervention and oversight, and that's wholly appropriate. But I think if you look forward, 3, 4, 5 years time, and the way in which machine learning and generative AI will develop, and not just for the insurance sector, but right across all sectors, then how that human oversight plays out. Obviously everybody wants to have benefits of much faster processing and settlement and convenience, and to remove the more mundane tasks out of the system, so that people can be undertaking more strategic thinking and work. Then all of those benefits obviously have risks attached to them in terms of, is the algorithm correct? Was the information collected by the AI tool correct? What may have been the flaws? So, applying that human sense check, it will always be, I think, critical. But in time, who knows how advanced generative AI will become in assessing risks, settling claims, and doing all the things that requires a lot of human work today.
Looking ahead, what are the main threats for the insurance industry in New Zealand in the future? And I guess, from where you're standing today, is the insurance industry in good shape in 2024? Well, yes, we've had severe weather events last few years. Just look at, Auckland floods and Cyclone Gabrielle as an example. But insurers are seeing, huge growth in their premiums. So what are insurers most worried about going forward? Is the industry in good shape, and what are your biggest concerns?
Yeah, so the growth in insurance premiums is largely down to increased risk and the increased costs. So even though premiums have grown, it's not necessarily reflective of insurers taking more profit or anything like that. So we've had construction inflation in New Zealand, which reflects into the cost of house insurance, running at least at about 30% over the last 2 years. That's sort of almost 20%. A couple of years ago, just under 10%. Last year, it's coming down. That's great. But those costs have contributed. Reinsurance costs globally have grown massively. The trigger for that was Hurricane Ian back in third quarter, I think, of 2021. But also there've been many very big climate-related events around the world, obviously across the Tasman back in 2022. Huge floods in New South Wales and Queensland, our events last year, and you can sort of track right around the world where there have been some very, very big insurance claims arising from climate. So that's contributed as well. Whilst insurers, obviously still around, all of that feeds into the affordability and accessibility challenge for insureds. The only way in which we can long-term sustainably address that challenge, because we want New Zealand to be well insured, is through managing that risk better. So, the industry is certainly in good shape, but if we want the industry to continue to play the role that it has played, and a very valuable role for these big events, from natural hazard events over the last decade or so, insurance has contributed probably close to $50 billion to meeting those costs. That's money that otherwise would have been really challenging for central government to deal with as well. So So it's really important that, we absolutely look at, have a good framework for climate adaptation, that is, and reducing the risk from climate. And then, just ongoing focus on those other big risks around cyber and earthquake as well. So we're very fortunate in New Zealand that we do have, a good mix of insurers. We have some of the largest reinsurers and insurers in the world who have a presence in New Zealand. It's great that we have, insurers who can purchase some of the largest amounts of reinsurance in the world. So I'm looking there particularly at our Australasian companies like IAG and Suncorp through their programs when they buy for Australia and New Zealand. Then we have great access to that reinsurance capital, which is so important for us. And we also have some great New Zealand-owned companies and mutuals operating here too. So we do have a nice mix of insurers operating in New Zealand.
Well, Tim, that kind of brings me to the end of the podcast. I'd love to know what your plans are for the future after finishing up at the council this week. Is there a long holiday planned?
I'm going to try to avoid feeling a bit guilty not doing something on Monday morning. I am a chartered member of the Institute of Directors, so ideally I'd like to be able to put that to some good use if someone will have me. But the first step will be not feeling guilty to doing nothing for a little while. But I know after a short while I'll be wanting to do something.
It's exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing that what is. Thanks so much for talking to me today. That was Tim Grafton, the Chief Executive of the Insurance Council of New Zealand. I'm Alice Summers from insurers.co.nz.